we're going to talk about flies. So fly memory. A biologist is breeding fruit flies to include a specific genetic mutation that will be useful in understanding memory in humans. To check whether a fly has a mutation, a DNA sequence is analyzed in a way that kills the fly. So the biologist only wants to test a sample of the flies to estimate the proportion of flies that have the mutation. The biologist selects 40 flies to sequence at random and finds that 9 of them. How many flies do you have? Let's stop right there. How many flies? 40. And he finds that 9 of them have the genetic mutation. So automatically you should be thinking a ratio, a proportion, okay? So question number 1, based on this sample, estimate the proportion of flies in this group that has the genetic mutation. Again, how many flies do you have in total? 40. And how many of them have the genetic mutation? 9 out of them. So our proportion will be 9 out of 40. Okay, and how much would that be? That would be 0.225. So about 0.225 have the genetic mutation. And that's it for that. Next question. The scientist is worried that only having one sample may not be reliable for estimating the population of flies with the mutation, but that does not want to sacrifice more flies to get a larger sample. I wouldn't care to kill a bunch of flies, but let's just go with the problem. The proportion from the sample is a good estimate for the population proportion. The proportion from the sample is a good estimate. Okay, but it's difficult to understand the possible variability from a single value. So Andre has a suggestion for how to better understand the variability. And he says, assume the sample is representative of the population of flies and create a simulation that mimics what the scientists found. So Andre gets 200 pieces of paper and marks 45 of them as mutant. How many pieces of paper he got? 200. How many he marked as mutant? 45. And puts them all in a bag. Since Andre decided to use 200 pieces of paper, why should 45 of them be marked mutant? What are some other combinations, the total number of pieces of paper and number marked mutant could he use? Okay, so first of all, what's telling you? What is this? He doesn't want to kill a bunch of flies, okay? But if you think about it, the nice thing about proportions is that a proportion has first of all, do numbers have an end? Do numbers end? No, they're infinite. So when we talk about proportions, we have different values that are equivalent, right? So for example, what's something equivalent to 1/2? Okay, can you say 2/4? Can you say 5/10? Can you say 10/20? Yeah, that's equivalent, right? That's still 1/2. So what they're asking you here is, why does it make sense to use 45 and 200? What was, first of all, the proportion here? The proportion was 9/40. Why can we use 45 and 200? And hopefully by now you were able to make that connection of what a proportion is, and you will be able to tell me that 45/200 is equivalent to, say, 9/40. Yeah, because that's what it is, okay? And there are other possibilities that you can use, okay? You can say 80 pieces and 18, okay? You can say 27 and 120 pieces. You can come up with whatever proportion you want, because up to this point numbers are infinite. So you can go in the millions if you want and still get the same proportion. Okay, so basically if you are given a sample that's small but you want to take it to a larger sample, okay, without having to, in this case, kill something, animals, right? We're talking about people, hopefully, or something else, you can simply use other proportions that are equivalent. And that's about this problem. Okay, next one. Andrew then simulates the scientist's samples by drawing a slip of paper from the bag, noting whether it is mutant or not, then replacing the paper into the bag and drawing another paper until he has a sample of 40. He repeats this process for 50 trials and create a dot plot showing the proportion that are mutant from each trial. Estimate values on the dot plot, a range of proportions that include about 95% of proportions from the trials. Okay, stop right here and tell me what is 95% of the data. What does that mean? How many standard deviations above the mean? Hopefully all of you said 2. If you said I don't know, I'll suggest you go back to the review videos I posted last week and you review what that means. Okay, so if I say 2 standard deviations within the mean, then I just have to look up here. So first of all, here they're telling you that this one, it's already as a proportion. So they are using already the margin of error. Okay, so what do you see here that looks like 95% within the mean? Well, you can clearly see that it's right here and it's right here. Okay, so that would be about 0.1 to 0.3. Remember that, I mean, if you read it again here, it says that you're showing the proportion. Okay, you're showing the proportion. So this is not, you're missing here something. You're missing the 1 standard deviation within. Okay, these are 2 already. Okay, Andre then finds the mean proportion from his simulations to be 0.2195 and the standard deviation to be 0.06. So you can go back and, add this up and you will see that this is accurate, right? And so it says, how far are your values from the last question from the mean? This will represent your estimate margin of error. So they're telling you what the mean is, and they're telling you that the mean is 0.91. 0.2195. But here we found that it was between 0.1 to 0.3. So I want to know what would that be in terms of my margin of error. So I just need to subtract it. Okay, I'm going to subtract 0.2195 minus 0.1. And that will give me a 0.12. Now, it says divide the distance from the last question by the standard deviation to get the margin of error in terms of the number of standard deviations. How many standard deviations did we talk about here? Okay, here remember that we're talking about that 95%. So how many standard deviations is that? You said 2, that's correct. So it says divide the distance from the last question. So since you got this 0.12, okay, 0.12 divided by what you think? Okay, well, my standard deviation, if my margin of error is 0.12 here, okay, I know that this is twice as much as the standard deviation. So that means that my actual standard deviation is 0.06. So that's what I'm going to divide it by, and I should get a 2. Okay, because the 95% is within 2 standard deviations of the mean. Okay, So all these numbers match. Therefore, can I answer this question? Yes. Based on Andre's simulations, should the scientists feel confident that the proportion of flies is within 2 standard deviations of the mean for the simulations? Absolutely yes. Yes, because we get that that estimate of 95% of proportions are actually within 2 standard deviations of the mean. So there's really, this one was really straightforward. And as you can see here, this is normally distributed. The other ones were probably not as much. Mine problem, for example, when I did the trials, but here you can clearly see that the margin of error, it's like I have confidence that this is true. Okay. Okay, and this is it for this problem.